Just a quick heads up before we start. On Sandwiched, we talk honestly about life, loss, and caregiving. That means conversations may touch on topics such as death and grief. We invite you to listen with care, and please do step away if you need to. Well, welcome to another episode of Sandwiched. I'm Paul Richardson, the host. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome Wayne Freeman Chong with us today. Wayne comes to us with a lot of experience. He's a keynote speaker, an executive. He's a social scientist by trade, founder of Defy Dementia Initiative, and a family caregiver. Wayne, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
Before we jump in, I always like to get started with what's bringing you joy this week?
What brings me joy? It has been a fairly eventful week. This week, I think it is my caregiving experiences, reaching out to new audiences that have brought me joy in the past days. There were 2 or 3 unexpected media appearances that my organization and I had, written as well as visual and just sort of came together around this week.
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
good.
didn't expect that. I mean, I thought you would be later. So surrounding my caregiving experience. So that's what has been bringing me joy past days.
Well, I know that in our early conversations, you really started to share a little bit about your caregiving journey and beginning in your early 20s. You know, for a lot of us, that's not common. And so I thought that where we would get started is really kind of taking us back a little bit into when you first saw yourself stepping into a caregiver role at, I think it was 21, if memory serves.
Yes.
Can you tell the audience more about what was going on in your life and what was happening?
Sure. So at 21, really, it was a time when I characterized it as caregiving calling me rather than stepping in or putting myself into the role.
Yeah.
At that time, my mom was, I guess she was in her 50s.
Okay.
And my mom's mom, my grandmother, she was in her 70s. Now, the care recipient really was my grandmother, who actually is the person I felt closest to growing up because she, while my parents were working, she took care of me. I mean, after school and all the things like going to the doctors and bring me out, me and my younger brother, when we were young boys out to play and neighborhood to get together with other children in the neighborhood. I mean, she did all that, we saw our parents mostly at night after their work time. So she was the one I felt close to by that time of 21. No doubt I was entering young adulthood and have my own circle, and I feel a great deal of gratitude and attachment to her. So when she became frail, that was when there was a part of my heart that went out to her.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to think twice about that. Her condition, I remember, was rheumatoid arthritis that came with diabetes and high cholesterol, the bad type of cholesterol, and also high blood pressure.
Wow.
So frailty due to those things means several limitations to her lifestyle. And at one point where her frailty kind of worsened, that was when she, from being able to walk using a walker, she had to be on the wheelchair for say half the day. At least that was the initial transition, and it was a tough time for her to just transit. It was also a tough time for my mom. Now, the little story about my mom at that point was that she actually was depressed. Like, she was sad. Like, she was not having good days most of the days. And she had that load to care for her own mom.
Yeah.
So, in one way, I could say I kind of also sympathize with my own mom, although the closeness I felt was with my grandmother, her mom. So, some might call it, well, when you stepped up. But I guess it's not so much having a great passion to do something for either one of them, but more like I saw that as a natural extension of what family meant. And so I just did that. And I did not know anything about
Yeah.
how to handle a wheelchair and change adult diapers and all that. But that's how it started, really.
That's really, I appreciate that. And as someone who also feels very lucky to have gotten to be very close with grandparents, right? They really are the greatest gift. And to your point, when my parents were working, or if I was sick, I was at home with my grandmother, right? And she was taking care of me. So I can feel a lot of exactly what you're experiencing. And also what you shared too is, I think it really is quite interesting for a lot of us. We maybe take a call we didn't realize we were accepting. We didn't necessarily go into the world to say, I'm going to be a family caregiver. But I think to your point, you stated it so perfectly, which was it became an extension of family. Seeing your grandmother start to slow down, have disease, her energy levels starting to shift, right? Having to use a walker part of the day, but then having to be in a wheelchair once her energy was diminished. And then also seeing that secondary caregiver, I guess, burnout through your mother, right? And how it was impacting her mental health and depression. At that point in time, when you started to step up, I mean, 21, right? That's the prime of life for a lot of folks. What was happening in your personal world? Were you in university? Did you have a family of your own at that point? Like, tell us what was also going on kind of in your world at that moment.
So at 21, let's see, if I put myself in those days, that was also a transition for me outside of caregiving, just for myself personally. I was kind of transiting into university from full-time military national service, which every male in Singapore has to do for 2 years. It was semester 1, so I was a freshman, going to be a freshman in the university. So that was that. So grappling with the various things that a freshman would do, like getting around, knowing new people. Actually, I was happy to regain my freedom, so to speak, no longer in military slacks. That was my life then, I think.
Yeah, lots of big milestones that you were experiencing kind of all at the same time. I wanted to talk about, in earlier conversations, you had mentioned a moment with your grandmother where there was a difficult experience and interaction between you and her. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? And what did it teach you about what I think now you very much understand, the weight of being a caregiver?
So the time, that year was, I think, my second year in the university. It was probably around 8 o'clock at night. That was a time when I usually would have been home from university class, but it was by 7. So 8 o'clock was kind of late, around I was home later than usual, right, that night. I guess it was a Thursday, if I could recall. I just came home with my bags and I was a little tired, but physically a bit tired, but mentally a bit stressed out, thinking about the various assignments I had to complete, and the lack of time to do them and how to get them done and so on. And I was just thinking about that, having those thoughts as I reached home. And when I reached home, that's when it got started. My grandmother was seated on her wheelchair already in the living room and she saw me. And the first thing she said when she saw me was, "Where were you?" And her first time asking this, I think I completely didn't hear that. I was still in my own world, my thinking about my school and the academics. And then she asked again, just a few seconds later, "Where were you? Why so late?" Now a second question. Then it dawned on me, oh no, I missed something that I was supposed to do for her. I forgot what it is today. It probably has to do with some care arrangement, like fixing something on her walker or fixing some part of her bed. So she was kind of waiting for that. She couldn't go to bed without that. That's what I remember right now. I suddenly felt bad. And so I quickly went to have a look at quickly went to take a look at what I had to do, and actually I should have done this, but I kind of ignored her. I went straight for what I had to do for her. So then I guess I I fixed it. But the thing is, while I was trying to fix that, either the walker or some part of the bed, then she was, I guess, had a bad day, or she was not in a good mood perhaps, and she just was nagging at me as much as I felt, and she just wasn't happy. And I guess I wasn't too happy either, because I had a long day. By the time I was done, I didn't feel appreciated for what I have contributed, the fixing of her bed or her walker. So I became displeased, and I raised my voice, and I said, okay, it's done, like that. She raised her voice because I raised my voice, and more words came, and so we entered into some kind of argument over what I should have done, or how earlier I should have come back, and why if I've forgotten this and that. And I was on my side then, just feeling frustrated. I had to explain this and that when I actually supposed to worry about my assignments, and so it came to a head where I actually pushed her, and she fell and hurt her elbow and her wrist, and I immediately regretted.
Yeah.
That was when I realized it was so tough to be a caregiver. That's when I was realized, much as I do not have depression like my mom, I can still catch myself doing something so aggressive that in my saner moments I wouldn't have done. But I did it.
Yeah.
And it was bad. I was ashamed of it.
Yeah.
I was really ashamed of it. I cried, in fact, because she hurt herself then, and the thing that really makes me feel so bad was that her most treasured, almost like a family heirloom, this bracelet, jade bracelet that she wore on her right wrist, broke into three. It was smashed. Yeah. There was still finer pieces that was gone. We could see three, but we couldn't join those three because they were the connecting pieces became fine powder. Jade, Chinese family. That's
Very, it's lots of history and connection from what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Broken jade, Chinese idiom or Chinese proverb has it that you break a jade, you lose actually how many years or how many tens of years of good fortune. That is something cultural, but that was what my grandma at that time held.
Yeah.
At that point, I felt so bad, like I couldn't undo what I have done. That it wasn't also a part of me to be naturally or spontaneously apologetic. So while I felt bad, the word sorry didn't come out of my mouth. Now, in retrospect, I realize, okay, it is a pride thing. It is some kind of arrogance thing, a self-centeredness thing. I hadn't learned how to say sorry. In other words, yeah, but I felt bad. That I had the feelings come to me so intense, much, and I just had a loss of words. In fact, I was stunned. So I was I was freezing there, and then I teared, and of course I helped her out, but I didn't know what to say. And she didn't say anything else after that. I was expecting her to scold me, to berate me even more harshly, right? But she didn't. I said earlier that I realized it's not easy, right? Caregiving, right? But the second thing I got was that, hey, if I could be so emotionally affected, then my mom probably worse. And other caregivers who are primary caregivers who see to the task 24/7.
Yeah.
And I was only a secondary. I mean, I only come back and had a secondary role, right? Like once a day I do certain tasks, right? So the second lesson I learned was, oh, no wonder my mom couldn't recover so quickly from her depression. In fact, probably it's this caregiving that made her depressed, or that exacerbated her feelings, her mood.
Yeah.
So I said, wow, so caregivers can be depressed. That was the second thing I learned. Right. And the third thing I learned was about my grandmother. She's incredibly strong, both physically, with whatever physical abilities she still had at that time, but much more mentally and emotionally. These folks who are, I mean, her caregivers, myself and my mom, we were not perfect caregivers at all.
Yes.
I'm certainly not perfect. I don't expect my mom to have been due to her depression, and but she was able to wow, just hold it together.
Yeah.
Just whatever inadequacies that my mom and I had to care to put in, that we had to care for her. She was able to hold her thing together, despite she has physical needs, activities of daily living limitations to dependent on. But so I realized how incredibly strong. Today I learned the word resilience. Back then I didn't know this word, that a care recipient, that a patient, a frail older person can have, despite being physically in need. See that?
Yeah.
I guess in a way I saw myself like a bully,
Mm,
and either bully or neglect, But and she was quiet after she hurt herself.
yeah.
I mean, uh, wow. I was expected to I expected myself to to be to be blamed, but she didn't say a word to blame me thereafter and the days after. I think she understood what I
I
didn't
think so.
understand at that
100%.
time.
Yeah.
And that understanding is today why I have studied psychology all the way up to PhD.
Yeah.
Depression. I realized that people can have depression, but caregivers can have even more.
Oh,
And
yes.
and and, and
Yes.
that, I was in my second year, right? University there, right? That was the year I decided on my major and I chose psychology.
Mm. You were living it.
Yeah, that's
You
when
were
I experienced.
experiencing these deep experiences that, that's kind of the call you answered. Well, Wayne, thank you for sharing that story. I think it can be uncomfortable, and I felt the discomfort and the pain and the shame and the ego, right? I could see that as you were telling the story, and also the beauty that kind of came through it on reflection, and that your grandmother didn't berate you for the moment because it was you were both stressed out, right? And I think really what I heard through that was that really exemplified what it means to be sandwiched. You were sandwiched between recently coming out of your military service, starting school, being active in university, new friend groups, and also too at 20, 21, 22, starting to care for an aging grandmother and also navigating your mom's mental health, right? You were sandwiched between all of those things. And I'm so grateful that your grandmother, maybe not in the moment, right? Because she was in pain and hurt, I would imagine, but was able to say, like, this is not who Wayne is. This is just a difficult moment. And there's no need to, as I would say, put salt in the wound, right? To make it worse. That's not going to be helpful.
Mm, right. Yeah, incredibly understanding. I think she realized, now in retrospect, I mean, she's long gone now. But in retrospect, I realized that many care recipients understand that it's not easy to be caregivers and may not otherwise usually want their family members to be unnecessarily burdened. I guess now in retrospect, I understand why many care recipients would rather or seemingly rather say, no, I'm okay when they're not so okay.
Yes.
Like it's okay. I can do this on my own while in fact they might just fall over.
Yeah.
Now I understand so much better. Then I think I just couldn't. Yeah, I didn't.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing the story about the jade bracelet, because I think that imagery, one, it talks about culture, and I love the story and connection about how that's linked to prosperity and opportunity, and that breaking, has such symbolism in this situation. And
Yeah.
in my side, listening to the story, I hope that through time and reflection, at least metaphorically speaking, you have put that jade bracelet back together, right? Through your education, through the work that you're doing now, through the research that you're doing, and all the projects in the space to bring light to caregivers and to our aging community, right? Because it's only growing. You're in Singapore, I'm in the US, and we're seeing this rapid aging population that need our support, and family caregivers are the backbone of that. So I just wanted to share from my perspective, looking in and listening, that's really quite meaningful. Thank you. I know over time, you've shared that your grandmother passed. I believe that you also stepped into more caregiver roles with your mom, and I think even with your father as well. Tell me a little bit more about that
Yes.
next generation and your role in caregiving.
So after my grandmother passed, I continued. So my life moved on. I had a duration of bereavement, and essentially, well, actually very interesting. The day she passed was the day I was to ask. If I recall, the day she passed was the day I was going to ask my girlfriend to be my wife, if I recall correctly. So life did move quite fast for me then because I postponed my proposal date. I soon became married and I moved out of the house and we had our own house, own home, and no kids of our own yet. Um, and mom was still physically okay, and her mood was a little better, less no caregiving duties, um, and it was about probably 5 years after my grandmother passed on that my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Okay.
Now, at that point, we still had no kids, so I tried to understand from the doctors. I kind of understood what caregiving meant by then already, and I was able to bring her to go with her to her medical appointments, go with her for treatment, and um, she I remember one moment of anguish when despite my efforts trying to encourage her to quickly decide on surgery to remove the cancerous uh, parts. She didn't seem to want to do that. And then, like months later, the cancer spread to the other parts of the body, and it was too late to do any surgery. So I at that point respected her decision, although I didn't feel so comfortable with her decision. The caregiving came while she was in her late stages. So she was undergoing chemotherapy already. There was bleeding, and she couldn't sleep well due to different feelings like bloatedness, all these caused by cancer, and also chemotherapy side effects. Um, so that was the time when, despite me not staying together with her, I get calls from her almost every day or other day, requesting certain assistance on day-to-day things. Now, at that point, my dad was still staying with my mom, and my younger brother, who was single, was with them. So three of them in the house. So that kind of tells me that somehow the other two weren't able to help my mom, or that my mom wasn't able to communicate her needs to them. So there's a part of me that is worried, but kind of had to learn to uh, uh, take things in my stride and have some boundaries. So while I could find out what my mom needed, I had to trust the other two persons at home to take care of her. So that year, every month, I was with my mom at the hospital. Now, the good and not so good news is that in the same year, my wife became pregnant, was expecting our first child. So now in Singapore, there is this women and children's hospital that sees both cancerous patients, women, as well as women who are expecting.
Oh, really? So you're at the same location for both appointments.
Same hospital, different buildings,
Yeah.
right? So I recall that was the year in which, yes, every 3 weeks or so, or
Wow.
4 weeks, I'll be in the hospital, either at the O&G, obstetrics and gynecological services, or at the gynecological cancer center, which is another building. It's either here or there. So one episode that I will not forget is when my mom's appointment and my wife's appointment clashed. Happened on the same day, same time. Of course, we would have foresaw it ahead of time, and I tried to change both onto a different day, and I couldn't. The situation was that my mom was not responding to treatment,
Okay.
to the course of treatment that her oncologist had for her. And the oncologist wanted to see her and me, who is knowledgeable on her condition, to discuss an alternative treatment plan. So that was an important conversation to be had. And it should be soon because we don't want the cancer to spread like wildfire in the body.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, my wife, right, had this appointment in which we would discover the sex of our first child. That was something that we were looking forward to. And in fact, it was also an important appointment because there were other checks that should be done at that point in time. I recall that was probably the 5th month of a pregnancy. So there we have it. 2 persons, same hospital and same day. And I just didn't know, how to manage. At that point, to make things a little bit more tricky, my brother was away. So otherwise, I could have asked my brother to stand in, right? I mean, he would have known and he would have adjusted whatever his schedule and to stand in. I couldn't ask my father to do that because he doesn't understand. He is not good with medical. He's not medically or his health literacy is not that high, so to speak. Medical literacy. Yeah. So it was challenging. I remember I had like 2-3 long talks with my wife, my mom, before, and I initially I just wasn't sure. I was so nervous. I didn't even tell one party that the other party had the same appointment on the same day. I kept it all within me. So it's just Wayne and I knew about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 days before the scheduled appointment. And I realized I had to talk to one of them about this, either one of the two. And so I talked to my wife. She was closest in proximity. We stayed together. And very thankfully, she said, look, just go with your mom. I can manage this. She just said like that without me having to say more.
Yeah.
Very understanding of her. But I was worried for her because actually she had complications at that point already, gestational diabetes.
Diabetes, yeah.
GD,
okay. Yeah.
right? This potential complication there, and us being first-time parents, didn't have that assurance that I guess many others might have if they had been parents. So, but she required no explanation. She just said, "Go with your mom," and I would just tell you what happened. I was a bit relieved, but the real relief really came when one day before the scheduled appointment, my brother just came back.
Okay.
From abroad, and due to some unforeseens, he was back early. Back in Singapore, I mean. And so I quickly told him what happened, and eventually he went with my mom, and I went with my wife to the doctors.
Good.
In fact, very interestingly, so I went with my wife, right? After my wife's appointment, my mom was still having an appointment, so my wife sat there. I just ran to the other side of the building and went into, I went in for the last 10 minutes of the last 15 minutes of my mom's appointment. So that was a very memorable day for me. What I got out of this, wow, so many things. I think the main thing I got out of this is learn how to talk.
Yes. Yeah.
Speak the uncomfortable truth.
Speak the uncomfortable. Yes.
Speak the uncomfortable truth. I mean, it was tough. I didn't know, because if I was to tell one about the other, I was just worried what that one person would think of me, right? In my role, either as a son or as a husband, right? And going to be father. But I realized, there is so much value in being upfront, in being just being open and upfront, because then things can work out. Be the solution to problems. In fact, I think in retrospect, that time I was the problem to solutions by not opening my mouth. I should have opened my mouth earlier to more people. Even if both of them wanted me there with them, I could have talked to more people. who
Yeah.
might be able, to. So I guess the problem is me. Despite me having been a caregiver already for my grandma years back, that experience didn't help me then when I was sandwiched between my wife and my own mother.
Yeah.
So the second lesson I learned was that, uncomfortable as it might be, decisions have to be made.
Mm.
And so I have to live with the consequences of decisions as a caregiver.
Yeah.
Right? Even if both sides are happy and all that, I know in my heart of hearts, if I'm here, I'm not there. There's this emotional baggage that I feel just by me not being there for this person. And so the lesson I learned was that I had to learn to decide as a caregiver and live and accept the consequences of my decision as a caregiver. So part of it has to do with trust in my higher power, trust in God.
Yeah.
To take care of the unknowns. And so that really challenged my faith in God. I have been a Christian for the last 27 years. So I guess that was one moment where it really challenged my faith in God, just knowing that there are many things that's beyond my control.
Yes. So many things are beyond our control. And in the end, it actually worked out okay. I mean, your brother coincidentally came back into town. Your wife's appointment ended a little bit early, so you could still join your mother's appointment for part of it. So everything kind of not perfectly worked out at all, but I think that your higher power, the stars aligned, the moments allowed themselves to kind of work itself out, right? And I really wanted to exemplify a couple of things. One is you talked about that even your story with your grandmother as a secondary caregiver wasn't as helpful in this situation. And maybe it's because it was different, right? You had more sandwiched components, right? You had a wife, you had a child on the way, you had a mother who was aging and managing cancer, right? And so the circumstances are different. And I wonder too, now it sounds like you were more of a primary caregiver, right? And so there was more necessity for you to be involved. And you also talked about that although your mom lived with your father and also your younger brother, your mom still reached out to you. And that really spoke to me as someone who I am the first one who generally gets the call from my mom. My mom is very young, but she lives with mental illness and she's been in and out of mental institutions most of my life. And over the last couple of years, I've really had to talk to her about I can't be the only person you reach out to for help. One, we're 1,500 miles away. Two, I have two other sisters. I'm like, I need you to spread the need, right? Reach out to one of my sisters for additional help. Like, I'll cover these areas and my sister will do this and another sister will do this, but it can't be all on one, even though maybe that's how I was okay with in the past. Today, my life is getting more complex. I feel more sandwiched. I feel like there's more on my plate and I don't want to burn out, right? As a caregiver, and you talked about, what I call burnout, but also mental health. It can be such a challenge with family caregivers. And so I'm trying to get in front of it. And that's why I'm saying, hey, I don't want to get to that stage. Let's bring in the rest of the family to help more. I'm curious, over time, did your father and your brother step up more into that role, or was it still you mostly as the person she would go to?
My brother did.
Okay.
My father didn't because he became frail.
Okay.
He couldn't. Yeah. So soon after my mom after that episode of being sandwiched and my mom saw the doctor and new course of treatment, I think it was probably 3 months after. I mean, my dad wanted to. In fact, one of the things that my mom became needful on was in the wee hours of the night, like 2 a.m. or 3 or 4 a.m. Needed somebody to shift her body like on the bed,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my brother took turns to do that until I think about 3 months into it when my dad, okay, so that's the next thing now. He fell at work, fell into coma. He kind of fainted at work, and after various investigation, was diagnosed with mini strokes of the brain. The doctors called it the TIA, transient ischemic attacks. And so then he became frail very quickly. So we had kind of two frail older persons in the house
Yeah.
then with my brother. So my brother really was the primary caregiver, you know. So yeah, and I felt for him, he had his day job to do as well. And of course we tried to get external help when we could. But still, my mom, between the two older folks, my mom was the one who was seemed to be more needy
Mhm.
at that point, and seemed to still want me to be there, like to be present,
Yeah.
you know, for her. So yep, I'm glad what you shared. What you shared is true. I had to learn boundaries, right? So these things I can help you. That things, please reach out to my brother, or my brother would come. And then these other things, there's external help. Right? That was what we would try. We tried to do then, those days, when both of the older folks became frail and were sick.
This episode of Sandwiched is brought to you by Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed is a purpose-driven platform helping families navigate aging, caregiving, and legacy planning with ease and compassion. Right now, the first 100 listeners to sign up will receive a free Tumbleweed membership for 1 full year. That's a value of over $100. But once those 100 spots are gone, they're gone. So don't delay. Go to tumbleweedplan.com. That's Tumbleweed Plan, PLAN.com. Click Get Started, fill in your account details, and enter the promo code SANDWICHED. SANDWICHED. Thanks for listening. Now back to today's episode.
So now, I mean, when I start to teach people about caregiving, communication, caregiving skills, and so on, one of the things I say to them and remind myself is that probably by a certain age, if we are lucky enough to live long enough, then we either have one or two illness or become a caregiver for somebody who does,
Yeah.
either in our family or around us. So I focus on dementia, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and other cause dementia, and then the statistic will be 1 in 3 for persons 85 and above.
Okay.
So I tell myself and my listeners that if we think that we are lucky enough to not be that 1 in 3, and we still want to live beyond 85, then chances are we are a caregiver.
Yeah.
At that age, when you're 85, for your spouse or
Wow.
for somebody who is
Friend, a sibling, a neighbor.
So that's what the country is, I guess, looking at right now. And so, yes, illness prevention is one way to go. But of course, the science also tells, as in the research, medical advances also tells us that certain illnesses, we still do not know what caused them.
Yeah.
So certainly for dementia, we only know that up to 45% of illnesses, up to 45% of the risk factors could be prevented. So there's more than half of the time we don't know why. And your best efforts, and still we may not be able to prevent dementia.
I love that you're trying to get this information in front of people and get the conversation out in the world. And to your point, for us to think about, if we make it to 85, if we're lucky enough, right, 1 in 3 of us are going to be navigating Alzheimer's or dementia, or the other two out of 3 of us are going to be a caregiver of some sorts. So it's kind of those are really the pathways. I'm curious now, if I think about, I spent a lot of years in human resources and, kind of corporate America. And I think about conversations we would have thinking about our employee population. And I wanted to lean into a conversation here about, because most of us, right, have to work. And so we're generally working for organizations, unless you're working, maybe you're an independent, but most of us are working for organizations. What types of programs, employee benefits, if any, have you seen or that you like to recommend to organizations to really bring about more family caregiver support?
In Singapore, the statistics is 1 in 2 employees are caregivers. One out of every 2 persons you see, one is probably a caregiver or somebody who is older or same age or younger. Right? Of course, caregiver here also includes care recipients or patients who are, say, younger, like developmental disorders, like say childhood disabilities, and so on. That's the statistics. You ask for the kind of programs that might help caregiver employees.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, in Singapore, we don't have a structure for that.
Okay.
We don't have a nationwide or sector-wide structure for that. In Singapore, we do have in organizations what we call the employee welfare initiatives, and those tend to be piecemeal or ad hoc. That means, for instance, once a month lunch and learn on mental health,
Yep.
mental illness. For instance, say what they call a learning forum on, say, some illness prevention, say diabetes prevention, right? Yes. In fact, topics just as focusing on caregiving or caregiver stress or avoidance of or reduction of caregiving burden, caregiver depression, improvement of caregiver health status, wellness, and so on. These talks, while the frequency of such talks happening is increasing, still they are not well known and therefore not very widespread. That means to say that organizations, I believe in Singapore, the human resource, the learning and development, right, L&D,
Yeah.
still do not yet really understand caregiving or caregiving lived experiences as a standalone topic
Yeah.
that directly affects. There's one or two good ones that I do know of. I think they are in isolation. Okay, I forgot the name of this company. One of the good ones I've seen actually starts with the understanding that caregiver stress actually leads to absenteeism. We want caregivers to be here at work. I mean, or work from home, but they need to be present. And what's keeping them from present, right, is actually their caregiving duties. Then that to this company, okay, is something to worry about. And then they start to have various, I would say, measures. The other there are two companies I know of with flexibility in what we call family care arrangements. So what that means is that with the benefit of, say, desk-bound jobs or computer-based jobs, right, one could work from home, say, half the time, half of the full-time duration. Then there is flexibility for these employees to either report to the office or to be at home, say, on a week-to-week basis. So maybe at one day there must be a synchronous, let's say, a team powwow, a team meeting. But on other days, this employee has the trust and the autonomy to decide for himself or herself to be at home or at the office, the designated workplace. So there are only a couple of organizations I know that has this, right? Now, there is something good though for everybody. This comes from the government, the Ministry of Manpower. There is this, what we call the flexible work arrangement, they call it. In other words, family leave, family care leave. All right, so now family care leave is not mandatory, but the Singapore Ministry of Manpower strongly encourages employers to give at least 6 days if employers can afford, right? At this point, if I recall correctly, 3 out of those 6 days are paid by the government. The other 3 are not.
Okay.
Right. So the employer has to pay that absentee payroll, so to speak. And that's probably the most widespread initiative. So those earlier two that I talked about, right? Specific training for caregiving experiences, as well as the flexibility to report to work, right? Or at home. Yeah, those are things that are not mandated, and those are initiatives that are still not widespread, so to speak. So yeah, I would say that in Singapore, that's the best I could see. Oh, okay, one more I should say, career development. So in this space, we know that caregivers, if they start to if they start to disengage from work, one day they may just retreat from full-time, become part-time, become very part, and then after that, become a seasonal employee, temporary employee, and then leave the workforce altogether, right? Like scaling down and down and down. So one way, one approach that I've seen that kind of work fairly well here in Singapore within the healthcare setting. That means healthcare employees. I'm talking about, say, nurses, physiotherapists, various allied health professions, is to provide employees in general, but especially those with caregiving, for personal caregiving responsibilities, a personalized career development pathway at whichever stage of their career. Can be senior staff nurse onwards, can be principal physiotherapists onwards, and so on. So what happens is this, when the idea is that when somebody sees a future at work, there's something to pull that person on, keep that person there.
Yep.
In big organizations, I realize whether it's healthcare or just any other corporates, employees can get lost. Employees can just go through the daily grind and sense or feel or think no future at work. Just come for the paycheck and just get my job done. Get it over with. And those employees who are, say, 10 years, 15 years in their jobs probably are the ones that start to go into what we call the caregiving cycle. The midlife, the mid-career people. So those tend to be managers, middle management. Those tend to be leaders of some sorts. So because I'm more familiar with healthcare industry, so I start to see that those who are given, say, mentorship as part of career development, like designated mentor, those who are given sponsorship, not so much the financially, but let's say somebody who can open doors for you if today your passion is in this area of nursing or that area of physiotherapy, right? Then somebody who can say, okay, give you a chance to do something that's a bit different because you feel you can learn something. So that's a sponsor. So sponsorship is another one. Persons who can open doors. So mentor, sponsor, career planning programs. That means teaching the nurse, teaching the therapist actually how to plan your career, not just with our hospital or with our healthcare system, right? But overall in general, as part of professional development, right? And the fourth thing I realize useful is leadership succession plan. Now, this one pertains to leaders. That means to say that for any business unit, whether a department, a division, right? If a person becomes a caregiver and starts to not show up or starts to reduce his her work time, and then because of that person's lack of reduction in work time, if the person is a leader, the team might suffer. And this might happen quite abruptly because caregiving doesn't come with you prepared, right? Caregiving comes suddenly, right? So then one of the things that healthcare organizations could do, and I see a few organizations start to do that already, is to what we call have two leaders leading one business unit.
Like co-leaders.
Yes. Right. So when one has to be called away for caregiving, become a part-time staff, you still have another leader, right? And then this person who became a caregiver and then became a part-time staff will feel the support will still feel the support that the team has for him or her. So then the leadership or the team dynamics is not so drastically, abruptly affected by just the presence of or the emergence of caregiving that affects the leader. Right? So the earlier things I talked about, mentorship and sponsorship and career development, that could apply to all. But when it comes to leaders, right, of any business unit, then I would say, yes, a leadership succession plan is very important.
Absolutely.
That has shown to help mitigate. You probably cannot eliminate, but it could mitigate the effects of caregiving, the negative effects that caregiving have on the team. And of course, for some units, it's quite quickly the ROI as well.
Yes.
The revenue as well.
Yes.
Right. But for healthcare, it won't be so quick. I guess in the finance industry, it's quite quick. It's quite fast. You can see just time equals how much revenue you get.
It's a little easier to calculate.
Well, and I want to draw some parallels to here in the US, right? With some of the things you spoke about. Here in the US, we have FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act, I believe. And that really is, across the US. And there are some variations by state in how much is offered, resources, et cetera. But it really is designed for a lot of things. I mean, it's pretty broad in caregiver support for families, right? And or it can even be the self in some situations. And so for folks who might be looking into this or grappling with it, definitely be sure to, a lot of HRs have teams you can talk to about FMLA and other resources. But I think what really I heard in this conversation, Wayne, especially in this space about thinking about employees as family caregivers, is, to your point, it comes on rapidly. In general, this is not something that's like a slow progression into you're now a family caregiver. Usually once we identify that we need to step in, it's not maybe too late, but there's so much need that it pulls so much of our energy and resources. And so I always try and look at it from both sides, right? As the employers, at the end of the day, they have to make money. They must support their customers, whatever their customers are, whether it's in healthcare, their patients, whether in finance, it's their customers, consulting, like it really doesn't matter. They're serving some customer in their role. And so it's really important that they maintain, good structure, good support, connection, resources. And on the employee side, when I've seen organizations do best practices, whether it's a family caregiver, a new mom, father leave, like whatever it is, the more that they can offer resources and tools more broadly to support their employees, those are the employees that are less likely to leave. They're more likely to come to the organization and say, hey, I don't want to, but right now my mom is going through cancer and it means that every 2 weeks I'm going to need to take a half a day. I'd be happy to come in early. I'd be happy to work at home that night, or I can use my PTO for 4 hours every other week, but I want to talk to you about it. And if the organization is supportive of that and creates tools and resources to where it's not afraid of it, then it becomes even a deeper connection, because the cost of turnover, right, of employees leaving organizations is very expensive, right? I mean, retraining, recruiting, getting people settled in a role. I mean, on average, when I worked in HR, one of the things we used to look at was it takes on average about a year for the average person to fully understand their new position in any company. So you've got a year of getting someone prepared to be whatever their role is, of training and, getting settled in and understanding how the business works and what the culture of the organization is. So all that's to say, I hope organizations continue to look at more. I think that there is, it sounds like in Singapore and here in the US, there's also some policy that can be implemented, at kind of federal and state levels around implementing programs and support mechanisms for our family caregivers. So I just wanted to draw some parallels here in the US because I think you spoke to so much.
It is, and if I can just reiterate that the cost or the replacement cost of
Yes.
of getting a new employee in Singapore, that is between 100% to 200% of annual salary. That's what has been published, of annual salary. Yeah, that means including all the actual hiring expenses, not just the manpower, the hiring, the advertising, but if just even the manpower itself is 50 to 60% of annual salary.
Yeah.
So if you add in all the hiring costs, that's 100 to 200%. So that's a big cost. When I talk to leaders, to company leaders about caregiving, how it is affecting caregivers, one thing in fact, I kind of tell them two things. One is that you got to identify your caregivers. You got to
Yes.
spot the signs. You have to find ways, metrics, tools to spot those signs, design it into your system, your processes. The second thing is you have to make sure your leaders hold the fort. Else, any little bit happens, the whole ship, okay, this part of the ship sinks, this part of the ship gets affected. You lose your business units. And so whatever new measures they are able and willing to put in, right, they should ultimately craft a systemic solution. That's what I tell them to end off. So I try to say, look, if you can spot the signs and you can protect your leaders or support your leaders, then you can start to talk about, okay, how to make these efforts and all your other human resource efforts more systematic. Integrate them within policies or have whatever company constitution, whatever you need to institute them properly, right? But it all begins with identifying where the touch points or the pain points that are related to caregiving are. So many employers, I guess, are just ill-equipped because I know human resource psychology doesn't often come with tools. Human resource psychology often is used to personnel job fit, right?
Yep.
Like consumer behavior. I mean, it's those areas. So basically, yeah. That's what the psychologist is employed for. But
Yep.
now I think the psychologists, what we call industrial organizational psychologists,
Yes.
would have to learn, yes, how to deal with caregiving employees, help organizations spot the signs, support their leaders, and systemize their solutions.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you know what an industrial organizational psychologist is. That's actually my background. So that's what actually my graduate degree is in. So that's perfect. And for folks not aware, I mean, it's so much more than just the HR. It's really when people ask me like, what in the world is that? I kind of frame it very simply as it's all about people at work. It's motivation, it's experience, it's culture transformation, it's talent management, it's learning. It really touches so many parts of the business. And to your point, please listen to Wayne, listen to other guests and to us, employers, people working in HR and organizational development and leaders in organizations. It's coming faster than we're prepared for. And to Wayne's point, like I love the focus on start to identify who are your caregivers in the organization. Because what I can say from a positive perspective, and I think Wayne talked a lot about it, these are people who can manage a lot. They can balance a lot, being pulled in many directions. I mean, they're hyper organized often. They can manage extreme pressure because it's going to be very overwhelming. So lean into the benefits of identifying your caregivers as really an untapped resource. So it's like, if we can be creative in how to support them and their family, how much are we going to get back as an organization too?
Absolutely. Yes. I just wish more employers in Singapore hear this.
Yeah.
Really. So yes, I will.
We're going to keep trying, Wayne. We're going to keep trying. All of us out there, all of us family caregivers, we're going to keep sharing this and getting it in front of folks to consider. And Wayne, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your willingness to say yes, to be a part of the sandwiched movement, as I call it, right? And I think, what you just shared is exactly what my goal is with this podcast. I talk to users, I talk to people who are navigating caregiving, aging, death and dying for family members and friends and even partners. And people feel really alone. They don't know how to talk about this. They don't even know how to approach maybe a friend, a colleague, a trusted person with this conversation. And I think your personal story right there really just resonated with me on the goal of Sandwich, just to get these stories out into the world so we can start talking more about it, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for all of your candor and your openness and your experience. I mean, you have such a vast experience, Wayne, professionally, personally, academically. And so thank you for joining that with me, for sharing that with me and our audience. And it's been another episode of Sandwiched. Any parting words, Wayne, before we say goodbye for today?
Well, to your audience, I would say that probably one is never more alone than you believe you are.
Mm.
So, I would say that many would tell you that you are not alone, and that is really true. And that is also true in the brain. Things are created twice. The loneliness is created first in the brain, first in your mind, and then in reality. So you're never too alone than you think you are.
Thank you, Wayne. As a family caregiver myself, I'm so grateful to have you in my community. I loved your personal stories. So many of them rang true, even though we're 13 hours apart, right? You're into the future from where we are. I feel so connected to you. And although we may be worlds apart, I also feel extremely connected and like we know each other. So Wayne, thank you. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you for the experience. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of Sandwiched. So grateful to Wayne for joining us today. Hope to see you next Friday. Sandwiched is a Second Act Studio production with support from Tumbleweed. We couldn't do this without the support of our production team, Maddie Willis, Brennan Plank, and our interns, Eileen O'Doherty and Anthony Cano. Thanks for listening, and remember, you are not alone. Have a great one.